Welcome back to part 2 of Chinese nutritional therapy. Last time we left off, we were talking about the thermal nature of different foods and how we can use that when working with food as medicine. We're going to pick up where we left off and we're going to start talking about foods that have different flavors and how we can use that with our horses. Do you want your horse to be strong, healthy, vibrant, and resilient? Do you want to proactively prevent illness and injury and have your horse recover with ease when challenges do arise? Welcome to Hale and Hearty Horses, your trusted hub for equine wellness and holistic care. Hi, I'm Dr. Rebecca, and I'm your host. So next in this is the 5 flavors. And with that, we're going to talk a little bit about their element and their organ system and their influence on the body. For instance, the 5 flavors are sweet, sour, bitter, pungent, and salty. And they honestly go to each of the 5 elements. So sweet goes to earth. And of course, we've talked about this multiple times by now, that the organ system for that is the spleen and the stomach. The action of the sweet flavor is it's harmonizing, it tonifies qi, and it promotes relaxation. So examples of that would be things like carrots or molasses, sweet potato, and barley. Of course, we have the sour flavor, which that is the wood element. The organ system associated with that is the liver and the gallbladder. The action of the sour flavor is it actually astringes, conserves fluid, and stabilizes energy. And 2 examples would be apples and citrus. Now the bitter flavor, that is in the fire element, that has to do with the heart and the small intestine organs. And the bitter flavor clears heat, it calms the spirit, and it supports heart function. Examples of bitter would be something like dandelion leaf, even dandelion root, or chamomile. We have the pungent and spicy flavor. That is of the metal element. The organ system associated with that is the lung and the large intestine. And the pungent is very good at moving qi, circulating qi, and releasing tension. Examples of a pungent would be ginger, fennel, and mint. And you notice that the ginger is also very warming, so this kind of gives you an idea how you would start combining these principles to be able to have a pungent, spicy that also warms and really build on this for this individualization for your horse. The final one is salty, and salty is associated with a water element, which has to do with the organ systems of the kidney and the bladder. The action involved with them is it softens hardness, it moistens, and it balances minerals. So examples of this would be sea salt and seaweed. So in Chinese medicine, the taste of the food actually gives you clues to its purpose. So sweet feeds comfort and add nourishment. Sour foods preserve and stabilize. Bitter foods cool and calm. Pungent foods move energy, and salty foods soften. So you can use flavor to fine-tune that nutritional strategy for your horse. We just talked about how flavor is associated with the 5 element, but how does that associate with your horse? So when we talk about the horse's constitution, what do we mean by them having like a 5 element constitution? Every horse is going to be either predominantly 1 element or a combination of 2. And so I want to go through them really quickly to give you an idea of where your horse might stand on the 5 element, and therefore you can feed them based on the 5 element that they are, using these principles of Chinese nutrition therapy. So what do we mean by constitutional element? So the constitution is this horse's inherited nature. So it's kind of like their temperament and their strengths and their vulnerabilities all wrapped into one. It's basically rooted in that prenatal qi, in those inherited genetics, but it's also shaped by that postnatal qi, basically their food, their environment, then their training. Horses, like people, have a constitutional type, And so these are described in the 5 element in this way. So a wood horse would be very ambitious, very forward, but can be very active. A fire horse is going to be very sociable, very expressive, and can be excitable. The earth horse is usually calm and dependent, sort of your steady Eddie, but can be very food loving and very food motivated. The metal horse is usually very disciplined but sensitive and easily constrained and trained. The water horse usually is very intelligent but can be cautious and easily fearful. So one of the most practical frameworks in Chinese medicine is this 5 elements, the wood, fire, earth, metal, water, and being able to figure out where your horse fits in that paradigm. And then each element then connects to a set of organs, emotions, and even the seasons. So you start to see how all this ties together. Your horse has a constitutional element. You have foods that support that element and also support those organs and also are related to a season. And it's all this really beautiful interwoven package. So let's explore how this can actually work as a feeding guide. So if you have a wood horse and your horse is very competitive, very forward, can be a little bit frustrated sometimes or hot-tempered, their organ system is the liver and the gallbladder, and this is linked to spring, and this is linked to movement. These horses can be prone to stagnation, which can cause heat. And this is usually sort of the excess, the excessive demonstration of this element. They can also have deficient symptoms, and these would look like blood deficiency. So you would have poor hoof quality, poor coat quality, or even poor tendon and ligament quality. Then there's the fire horses. Fire horses are usually spirited, expressive, maybe a little bit emotional. They can be easily agitated, they can sweat easily, and they can be very sensitive and even sensitive to temperature like heat. Their organ system is the heart, the pericardium, the small intestine, and the triple heater. They can be prone to overheating and restlessness in excess or lacking joy or purpose and deficiency. Then there's the earth horses. The earth horses are steady and nurturing, but they can kind of struggle with digestion or sluggishness. They can accumulate damp. Their organ system is the spleen and the stomach. They can accumulate dampness in excess or fatigue and lethargy in deficiency. Metal horses are disciplined but yet sensitive. They can be prone to respiratory issues. Their organ system is the lung and the large intestine. They can be prone to rigidity, fixation, and stiffness in excess, or dry coat, respiratory infection, and easily startle response in deficiency. And then, of course, the 5th element is water. Water horses are intuitive, sometimes fearful, and may suffer with stiffness or lower back pain in cold weather. They're prone to be stubborn, willful, and earthbound in excess, or fearful, reactive, and unpredictable in deficiency. So when we go to feed by constitution, we're going to look at the element. We're going to say, okay, I have a wood horse. That means they have a tendency toward tense muscles, irritability, easy frustration. I'm going to look for cooling and sour foods to balance that. If I have a fire horse, they're going to be easily overexcited and have a lot of heat signs, so I'm going to look at cooling and bitter foods to help overcome that, to balance them out. If I have an earth horse, they're prone to dampness and weight gain, so I am going to use drying and warming foods to help support their digestion and their energy. If I have a metal horse, then their tendency is toward respiratory or skin issues, and I'm going to balance that by using moistening and pungent foods. And then if I have a water horse, they're prone to this fearfulness, stiffness, and cold sensitivity, and I'm going to balance them by using warming foods and salty foods. Just see how that works and how that all interplays. So really the goal is this long-term harmony. So we're going to support what's weak. We're going to moderate what's excessive. We're going to adjust with the season and, of course, the workload. And the constitutions can shift a little bit over time, and depending on the season, depending on their workload, depending on what's going on with their life. And it's important to feed who the horse is in the moment, not what they were last week or not what you think that they're going to be next month, but what they are in the moment. So when we feed with this awareness of the 5-element constitution, we're not just feeding the body calories. We're not just giving them calories in, calories out. We are actually nourishing their spirit as well, since each element has a mental and emotional quality to it. We didn't go in that really in depth, and maybe we'll have to do a podcast just on the 5 elements so we can go really in depth. But there is a mental, emotional quality to each of the 5 elements, and by feeding them foods that balance their 5 element, we're also balancing that mental, emotional quality as well. So the final thing is this direction bit, right? So the direction of movement refers to how the food's energetic influence moves qi, moves it in the body. Does it move it upward? Does it move it downward? Does it move it inward? Or does it move it outward? We're going to move things outward when we want to send them to the surface to expel them. We want to move them inward when we want to consolidate them or pull them in. So when we apply this to horses, you'll pick the direction of movement that pertains to what your horse is experiencing. So let's look at this a little bit closer so you have an idea. So the upward movement is going to have the effect of raising qi, lifting energy, and raising it up to the surface or to the head. So examples of foods that do that would be things like an upward young plant, especially things like alfalfa. Other foods would be oats or peppermint, fennel, green onions, and garlic. So we would use this for horses that were lethargic, that they had a weak top line, they had poor posture, or they had any sort of like prolapse or sinking qi type phenomenon. Then we have the direction of movement that sends qi downward. It guides qi downward to promote things like urination, bowel movements, or even to energetically ground a horse. So one of the functions of what energy medicine is, if you have a lot of scattered, things are kind of crazy and the horse is in its head and it's really excitable, one of the ways that we can work with that is by bringing this feeling of grounding to the body. And we can do that with foods that actually direct the movement downward. So foods that do that would be things like barley, wheat bran, carrots, and sesame seeds. So we're going to use that to clear this excess from the upper body. We can also use it to relieve bloating or constipation, and actually to calm what we call rebellious qi. There is certain flow of qi in the body for each organ, where one organ's supposed to go up, another organ's supposed to go down. And if it goes the wrong way, then we call that rebellious qi, and these foods can help counteract that. Then we have the direction of movement to be outward, and that is to move qi out to the surface to promote sweating or venting. A lot of times we'll use this when we're talking about expelling a pathogen. We want to send it out toward the surface of the body so the body can release it. Herbs and foods that do that are peppermint, chamomile, fresh ginger, and spearmint. So we can use this, like I said, to release external pathogens, things like fevers, any sort of infections, stuff like that. And we are usually going to use it in the early stages of a respiratory condition where we want to expel the pathogen. So it's usually for acute type things. Then we have the movement of pulling things inward. We're consolidating qi. We're retaining something. We want to hold on to something. We want to hold on to fluids. We want to hold on to that essence. Examples are molasses, dates, black sesame seeds, and licorice root. So this is used for horses with maybe a lot of fluid loss, dryness, or deficiency symptoms where they need that nourishment and that containment. So let's look at just a couple like brief examples of horses that might not be quite textbook, but let's say you have a horse with an early onset of a respiratory condition from an exterior pathogen. They went to a show, they picked up a bug, they're starting to get a little bit of a respiratory infection. Your vet has come out and they've prescribed what they want the horse to be on medically, but you want to try and expel that pathogen. It's very acute and you want to try and expel that out. You can try things like peppermint and put that in their food as well to help push that pathogen out of the body. It's okay if you don't really understand all these concepts. I would just want you to try and get the big picture for now, because in reality, if you're going to use this without some deep study, you really should hire someone to help you. You should get a professional that can quickly help you to come up with some dietary suggestions for your horse. So another example is a horse that has a very loose stool, a weak appetite, fatigued. And with that horse, you want to use those neutral to slightly warming foods. You want to harmonize digestion. You want to support the earth element in that inner center. And you want to be able to pull things inward to retain them. Let's say that you have a horse with a lot of heat and inflammation. You're going to want to use the cooling foods. You're also going to want to vent and release that heat and reduce the inflammation and move the chi so it can start moving it through the body. So that gives you some basic principles to start using food as medicine. When we talk about Chinese nutritional therapy, we look at food in a different way than we look in just nutrition or functional nutrition or just any basic nutrition course, because it's not just about calories and it's not just about micronutrients and macronutrients. It's really how the food affects the body. It's that energetic quality. What does it do? Each of these foods has an energetic temperature, a flavor, an organ affinity, an element that is associated with it. And by choosing specific foods, we can gently correct imbalances by supporting organs, doing things like clearing heat, draining damp, or building strength. And this is both a treatment and a preventative medicine, individualized for your horse's specific issue, as it's usually pretty safe, subtle, natural, and like I said, it's ongoing because you can work with it every day. So I want to talk about a few common imbalances and food therapies so that we sort of wrap this all up so you have a better feel for what I'm talking about. So if we have a horse that has too much dampness, so they have too much moisture in their system, they usually have sluggish digestion, their spleen and stomach is not functioning really well. Sometimes they'll have like loose manure and they'll have water retention in their legs. Sometimes they'll have a dull coat and they'll be lethargic. In Chinese medicine, we're going to be looking at supporting the spleen and stomach. We're going to talk about drying out that dampness and providing warmth to that inner center. So helpful foods would be barley, fennel, and ginger. So let's talk about the heat or the fire excess. So this is like that restless horse that's a little bit anxious. They're hot under the collar. Sometimes they are even hot to the touch or have hot skin without having a temperature. They can be sweaty. They can be irritable. Our strategy is we want to cool and calm them. So we're going to use things like carrots, cucumber, and seaweed. Now, if you have the opposite, you have the cold horse, you have the yang deficient horse, then that horse has cold ears, they're kind of slow, they have slow digestion, they're stiff, they're kind of stuck a little bit, then we're going to want to warm and stimulate them. And so we're going to use helpful foods like oats, ginger, cinnamon, and alfalfa. Now, let's say that you have the qi deficient horse. So this is a horse that is very fatigued, has a poor appetite or a weak appetite, slowly recovers if it gets sick or injured or ill. And we want to really nourish and tonify and strengthen that horse. We're going to be looking at helpful foods like sweet potatoes, pumpkin, and rice bran. Then the other one let's talk about is blood deficiency. Now, we haven't really talked about this much. You wouldn't be able to test the horse and like their CBC come back with low red blood cell count. So it's not that. In Chinese medicine, blood deficiency more has to do with the syndrome of specific symptoms. So things like pale gums, a dry coat. Sometimes there can be anxiety. There can also be things like poor hoof quality and poor hair quality. It's not just dryness, it's like the quality of the hair isn't really good. And in that, we really want to nourish and moisten. And so we're going to use any of the nourishing and moistening foods that we've listed above, but we can also add things like beetroot. Okay, so that is a lot. I know sometimes when I get on these Chinese medicine talks, they can get really in depth really quickly. And just so you understand, because I think a lot of times people don't understand the depth of Chinese medicine and they think it's just about acupuncture and they think it's about just sticking a needle in a point somewhere to release pain. And it's so not. It's so in depth. It's a beautiful medicine, the way that it is so interrelated and everything works together in such a beautiful way. This is just one little tiny drop in a huge bucket. Please understand that maybe some of this is old news and you know this and it's just a recap. Maybe some of this is brand new and you're a little bit overwhelmed. Understand that the depth and beauty of Chinese medicine is really something that it's kind of like riding horses. You can study it for a lifetime and still never feel like you've mastered it because there's so much to it. So I know we covered a lot today, but let me try and recap it just so you can come away with some really good thoughts about how you're going to approach feeding your horse from here on out. So first and foremost, when we are feeding via Chinese medicine, we're really looking at supporting digestion. We want to keep the spleen strong and we want to keep the qi flowing. We want that transformation and transportation to be really strong because a horse with a strong inner center has the energy and the immunity and the vitality to thrive no matter what they do. The second thing is we want to support the change of the seasons. So we're going to adjust the feeds with the season, adding warmth when it's cold, cooling foods when it's hot, and that way your horse's internal climate can stay very balanced despite what's going on externally. The third thing is we're going to use food as medicine. We're going to look for subtle imbalances and we're gently addressing them through diet. So whether they're warming, cooling, moistening, drying, it all depends on what your horse needs. And the fourth is we're going to treat the constitution. So every horse is unique and we're going to feed them according to their individual nature, their individual needs, their inherited strength and vulnerabilities. And we're going to feed them based on what they are presenting and what we're asking of them. And finally, we're going to consider the direction of that movement of whether we need to send something up, down, in, or out. Every horse is unique. You will want to take that into consideration when you're formulating your feeding regimen. And you're going to want to feed according to the horse's individual nature, their inherited strengths, their weaknesses, the demands on their body, and everything that they need to be supported in what you're asking them to do. So this is a great way to support that individualized health. What we talk about in holistic medicine is the ability to make it individualized to that one horse that's standing in front of you. So this is a great way to support that individualized health from the very foundation of their being. So Chinese nutrition therapy is about enriching our current understanding of food and adding an awareness of the energetic properties of that food to bring holistic healing methods to your horse's everyday life. So that means every scoop and every ingredient carries an intention and a purpose and an energy with it. And when we match that energy to our horse's needs, we create harmony, vitality, and partnership from the inside out. Thanks you for listening today. May this help you develop a feed for your horse that is thoughtful, nourishing, and full of care. I'll see you next time.